And again, we're here inside Mission Control now while we're getting ready for a launch of a Soyuz craft tomorrow. There's some other training taking place here in the control center to get prepared for NASA's next generation vehicle, Orion, and its launch taking place later this fall. Joining me again is Flight Director Mike Serafin, who's going to be overseeing the team for that EFT-1 Exploration Flight Test 1 launch later this year. Mike, you joined me a little bit earlier this year in February when we were talking about the recovery test out in the ocean that was taking place, and I understand this week you guys are getting ready to do some simulations here in Mission Control. Now, real quick, before we get into those, just in case it's the first time anybody's hearing about this, give me a quick overview of what EFT-1 is, what you guys are hoping to accomplish.
Right. So good morning, and thanks for having me, Dan. EFT-1 is the first space flight of the Orion capsule. So we're going to fly Orion into a high Earth orbit, and it's going to do a high energy return and test out the critical systems required before we put humans on board and go into deep space. So it'll launch out of Cape Canaveral Air Station on a United Launch Alliance Delta IV Heavy rocket, Launch Complex 37. And it'll do 2 orbits around the Earth, and the launch vehicle will boost it into a low Earth orbit, the first orbit, on a due east inclination. And it'll fly from the Kennedy Space Center around the Earth once at about 100 to 380 nautical mile orbit. And then on the second orbit, the upper stage on the Delta rocket will boost it even higher, and it'll go into what we call a high Earth orbit, and it'll exceed over 3,000 nautical miles. What that'll do on the high end of the orbit is set up a high energy return to test the heat shield, and it'll put 85% of the energy into that capsule that it'll return from deep space or a return from the moon on. So it'll test out the heat shield and all the critical functions on Orion and make sure that it's ready to go before we put humans on it later on.
And this is a much very, very different reentry than we've been used to seeing over the last 20, 30, 40 years.
Yeah, absolutely. It basically is returning back to the Apollo era trajectories where we, in the 60s and 70s, we sent humans beyond Earth orbit and captured it into lunar gravity. We're going to do that same thing for downstream flights for Orion, but we're going to basically mimic and set up the initial conditions using the Delta launch vehicle on the upper stage and really test the capabilities of the spacecraft.
Okay, so again, really different test than what we've done in decades, so really important to train for it, obviously, and you guys are going to be doing some of that this week. So tell me a little bit about what these simulations are going to be this week, who's getting involved from the flight control team, what are you guys going to be doing?
Right, so I'll be here in Mission Control with my flight control team. It's a blended team of NASA and Lockheed folks, and we'll be just down the hall in the blue flight control room. It's where the International Space Station operations were conducted before it moved to the present-day room, Ficker 1, that you see with us on TV today. And my team will be working with a team out at the Kennedy Space Center in the Test and Launch Control Center, which is used to power up the spacecraft. Shane Roski and his Lockheed team will configure the Orion spacecraft and get it ready for launch, and then at liftoff we'll take over in Mission Control. There'll also be a team of managers located on the Cape Canaveral Air Force Station side of the house, located in a facility called Hangar AE. That mission management team, along with an engineering team, also at the Kennedy Space Center in the operations and checkout facility, will all work together as one big team, the Orion team, and basically make sure that the spacecraft is ready to come home and that we're ready to handle any scenario. And we've been doing a little bit of training on the MCC side, and we're going to bring in the larger engineering team and the mission management team and train together as one big Orion team and test out the brand new program that we've established and the brand new concept of operations, because it is a new spacecraft. It does have different capabilities, and the program structure and engineering team is different. Prime contractor is different. So we're working together to establish a healthy program culture in a brand new team, the Orion team, and we're going to test out our concept of operations this coming week. And it's an exciting point because it means we're getting really close to flying this thing.
Well, I mean, it's very integrated. It sounds like you're getting, everybody together who's going to be there for the actual show once it goes off. About how many sims do you guys typically do, leading up to this kind of a flight, or how many are you planning to do over the next year or so?
Yes, so the total number of simulations, we're doing about one a month.
Okay.
So we started back in the December timeframe, and we'll probably launch in late fall timeframe whenever the spacecraft is ready. So we'll do about a dozen sims by the time we're ready to fly, and about a third of those we're going to involve the mission management team and the engineering team, and really flesh out that concept of operations for the launch to flight to recovery, and then integrate it with the engineering and mission management team. And again, it's all new interfaces. Some of it's brand new ground infrastructure, and the team members, for the most part, have never sat in those roles before. They may have supported operations or engineering on different programs before, but this being a brand new program, folks have really never sat in that seat before, so we're going to understand our own roles and responsibilities as well as how to interact with the other team members as a large team, and successfully fly Orion together this fall.
Okay, and I know, like you said, it's going to be testing out a lot of the systems on Orion, obviously, for the engineering folks and things like that. What are you and the team really hoping to take away from EFT-1 once it gets off the ground?
So the key goals are to test the critical systems on board the spacecraft, and when Orion becomes a free flyer in that second orbit, it is going to separate from the upper stage and test its own attitude control system, its own flight computers, its own guidance and navigation functions, all of the critical separation events like jettisoning the forward bay cover that is used to cover the main parachutes during entry, descent, and landing. It's basically a heat shield that goes over the parachutes. The main parachute deploy and splashdown conditions. We're going to gather data on all that and make sure that the conditions on board the spacecraft are safe to put humans on board for downstream flights, and that the heat shield and all the other critical components do their job. And if we learn that there's a little less margin in the system than we would like, we're going to find that out in an unmanned flight test configuration, and then we'll be able to basically ensure that human spaceflight later on is safe and successful.
Okay, well, big flight coming up, big sims this week. I mean, real quick, sounds like you're getting excited. You got to be getting excited that it's almost here.
Yeah, my team's ready, and we're going to do a great job this week. The larger team, we've got to basically make sure that we're all on the same page, and that's what we'll learn this week, and that's why we're going to do these large integrated sims with all the players. And I'm sure we're going to learn a few things, and I'm sure we're going to fix those and modify them for downstream training opportunities, but also for the mission. And that's why we train, is to really pound flat the plan that we've got, and to make sure that there aren't any soft spots, and if we do find them, we'll go fill them in, and we'll make sure that that as a team and as a integrated operations team, that we're ready to go, and I look forward to it. Again, this means that we're getting close to flying, and we're going to fly this fall.
Oh yeah. All right. Well, again, Mike Serafin, NASA Flight Director, who's going to be overseeing Exploration Flight Test 1 later this year. Going to be doing some sims this week as they continue to march forward towards that launch date. Again, the first flight into space of NASA's Orion, going to be a really exciting time. As always, you can visit nasa.gov/Orion for all of the latest in the program, news, pictures, everything you could possibly want to see. Mike, thanks so much for joining me here today. I'll probably see you in the sim room a little bit later this week. I really appreciate the update. Thanks.
Yeah, thanks for having me.